Welcome back, everyone. My name's Tommy McCarthy. We are GISEC Global, and this is Let's Talk Cyber. Well, what an interesting young lady we've got with us today, Susanne Bitter. Don't be fooled by the name. She's not bitter, it's her family name. Susanne's going to be talking to us today about data privacy and its role in the cyber realm, and I'm really intrigued to hear a lot more about her because it's a world that I live in and I breathe. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, as they say, Susanne, would love you to tell us a little about who you are, where you're from, and what are you doing?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tom, for the introduction, and thank you for having me here. A real pleasure. As mentioned, my name is Susanne Bitter. I do work within my own company as a consultant, focusing especially about the data protection, data privacy, information security, but also I do serve as a head of international alliances within the United Kingdom for Cybersecurity Forum Initiative, which is a volunteering company, a non-profit or company which focuses on the secure world in the cyber.
Wonderful, Susanne. And we're going to talk about data privacy.
Mhm.
And I guess the one question I've got to ask you is, why should we care about data privacy? What's all the fuss about? Tell us about it.
Um, I would say it's all about us. So I would say we have to care because it does concern us. So when it comes to the data privacy, and everything around the individuals, we should be having control about how our information is actually protected. We should actually have understanding where our data goes. And I believe it's not really much happening. And I think a lot of people actually take their data very lightly. Either they do not know the risk, maybe they do not know what is happening. At the same time, sometimes it's very overload of the information that people do. But there are certain principles, and when we think about that, and where I would like to put the framework into, is we should care about how our data, like your name, your address, your medical records, things that you like, for example, it could include sexual orientation, your I don't know, kids or family and stuff like that. Those are very private things. And I believe they do deserve a certain protection. So there are elements where also on the legal environment and government spaces, especially in the Europe, what has happened is that they put it up to the level that is actually become a legal frameworks to put it as the governance to the space of data privacy. Why it has been done is because a lot of people on their own, they do not have the leverage towards organizations, they do not know, and a lot of company, honestly, between me and you, they often do not care about your data because their main, primary aspect or primary intent is to earn money. They do not really care about your privacy. So having data privacy framework and rising up a lot of governance or governmental legal framework is very important, and especially we see it in the Europe. So I think everybody has remember that in 2018 there has been a big boom about the GDPR, right? Europe, also UK has implemented. So when it came to that, it was such a boom, but it wasn't a new thing. There has been a Data Privacy Act within the UK already, for example, operating, but by GDPR introduction into Europe, it was a big, big, big boom in the data privacy. And all of a sudden, those companies who have been collecting the data and who have been processing your data for various reasons, and there is so many intent behind having your data, actually start being accountable, and they had to actually adhere to certain principles, which at first intent it should not be a surprise, but it actually has for many people that the data that some organizations are collecting, there should be lawful, and they should collect it for the explicit reason or explicit purpose, which a lot of people, when they collected your data, they took your name, they take your age, they take your preferences and all the stuff, and all of a sudden they have this bucket of the data which they put a bow on and send it to somebody else, like for example insurance companies or marketing companies. Hey, contact them, they probably will like your product, and all of a sudden the whole package with the bow has start spreading across the web. And that is not something you can control, because how you will keep the companies accountable, right? Likely not much.
No, well, you're absolutely right. When I said why should we care, I completely agree and understand with everything that you're saying. That data protection affords individuals the right to
Yes.
have a voice. You're absolutely right. There has been a lot of misuse of personal data over the years, and I'm sure I'm one of many people that gets a multitude of phone calls from organisations claiming to have uh, services to provide me, and I often ask, where did you get my information from?
Yes.
And in most cases, they hang up on me. So, I completely acknowledge the fact that we do need to understand about data protection. And I'm interested to see that here we're touching on the EU GDPR, and more importantly, the many companies that are around the world based in Dubai that have to adhere to the EU GDPR because of the data sharing that
Yes.
they're involved with. What's the reason that you're talking more about EU GDPR at GISEC this year? Why did you decide to focus on that?
So that's a very good point which you have mentioned, because a lot of companies, because of the whole globalization, have their branches or their operation centers outside of the Europe. So there is a lot of business process outsourcing happening across to India or to Philippines or to the Middle East, to Africa, also for the South America, because of the cheaper labor. But what
Yeah,
it comes is, where those data leave the jurisdiction of a certain country or continent, for example, GDPR for Europe, now since UK has left European Union, UK on its own. But there are also, for example, I think it's in the California has happened to have a California Consumer Privacy Act. So even in the United States, where often the privacy of the consumer is not taken as their right, but more like a nice to have, it's becoming more important. So especially when you think then to the Middle East and to the boom of the businesses and interaction, that you have a headquarter in UK or headquarter in the, I don't know, Dubai or Qatar or any other countries, you often will have a European citizens who are either working or consuming your products either virtually or physically. So when it comes to any collection of the data, it's very much about the awareness and making sure that people and organizations who either directly or indirectly aim to collect data, they should put the privacy around it. They should protect the data. And between me and you, I would say, Tom, I would not necessarily just focus on European data or European citizens. I would say, in general, just people, right? Like of one
yeah,
human race, because we have our rights, and just because I cannot do as a consumer due diligence, oh, where this company operates. Do they operate from this country or this city, or what is happening? I should, as an organization, hold myself accountable. If I want to collect some information about my clients, my customers, my users, let's do it properly. Let's give them the confidence, the assurance that we take their data, not for guaranteed and granted, but we will put the security around it, we will protect it, and we will be absolutely transparent about where we use the data. So my best practice and what I will talk on the GISEC about within the workshop is about how you can actually make it. You first of all, you have to understand the government legal requirements, but then if you want to do it as a best practice, not because legal background or legal requirements require you to do that, but because you want to be with the new emerging requirements in a line, then you should be focusing on the data protection, understanding what do you need to collect, and asking the typical question, why do you even collect the data? Because many organizations, they like hoarding data just in case.
yeah,
They have million thousands inputs, which is expensive for the data hosting or archiving of the data, but also it creates a lot of mess with their databases or their data sets and everything. So I think the good protection about the data is also it puts a spotlight on the data that you're collecting, and you can ask the question, why what are we having? Why are we collecting? So giving an example, because I know that I talk a little bit in the technical forms, is when you're submitting your, let's say, submission to some online football streaming sport activity, right? It should be
Yeah.
maybe name, and maybe email address. What else do you need? Maybe if it's paid, maybe payment data, but that's a different story about PCI DSRs. But why do you need to know my address? Why do you need to know if I'm married? Why do you need to know where I went to school? That's not necessarily. So what are you asking? In my mind, like being a little bit paranoid, I'll be asking what dodgy things you will be doing with my data, because this is not relevant to sport or football match I want to watch. So that will be my talk within the GISEC about companies holding them accountable, doing the right thing, and making sure that they cut resources and they cut cost of all holding all those data which are not fit for purpose. And if any legal requirements or any law will come effective, it will be simply for them to adapt to these requirements in the time, because I'm assuming that they will actually happen. I do believe that more law will be put in place in different areas to catch up on the European quite strict GDPR. And I think when a company will start doing the steps, doing the mapping, focusing on what is their data journey, understanding what controls they have around the data, they are a winner, because they go with the time, they will be prepared, and they provide the transparency and I would say assurance for the users. So that will be my talk in the
Yeah.
big bum.
No, for people that have an interest in data privacy, I have no doubt that you will be inundated with questions, because it is such a minefield. And one of the things that most people will want to know are, what are the risks if we don't manage our data properly? What are the risks? And more importantly, what can go wrong if we don't manage and control people's data? So do you want to share a little bit of your own opinion on what can go wrong, and what are the risks to people's data being held by non-accountable organizations?
How much time do we have? Because I could be in here. So many things can go wrong, to be honest, Tom. But I also think, for me, the shocking thing is how difficult understanding all this has become. So I would say the immediate risk is kind of an information fatigue around all the information that you have to collect. So I believe you remember when you are going to the Internet Explorer and you just want to go to website, all of a sudden cookies. Do you want to set up your preferences? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? And you're like, I'm tired. This is like within 5 minutes, 11th page that I need to click something.
Yeah.
And people become fatigued, which, again, not every company, but a lot of companies play on this. And when you're having, you can see highlighted more like accept all, you're giving from legal perspective an acceptance, whatever is written there, which you haven't read, nobody reads that they can do with their data whatever they wish. So I think one of the biggest risks is that fatigue and the kind of indifference what's going to happen, right? So I would say from that perspective, that is one big risk for me, that people do not know what they consent to, but
Yeah.
legally they are actually in the organizations are legally in the right to do whatever because they have consent and it was voluntarily given. The fact it was given by tiredness and I said I have enough of this, like just click, I just want to go to this website, that is sadly enough like a big risk. Why should we again think about that it's wrong? Is because all those data are passed or million of vendors, and I do not exaggerate, million is a small number. Sometimes I would say look at into the things that you do. Like I have these of my friends, they are having these obsessions with those apps on the Facebook, Instagram and everything, and I'm always fascinated how many people actually have enough time to fill in quiz or game or anything in exchange for your privacy data, just in the order to find out what type of potato you are.
Yes.
I'm in a shock. Like, I'm like, okay, so it's important for you to understand if you're green, yellow, or whatever potato, just because it's a fun. But then, in fact, you are telling them your name, date of the birth, where do you live, often all the security questions that could be asked within some of your banking or some very serious thing where you need the security a little bit higher. but you exchange that voluntarily just to see what kind of potato it is. So it just puzzles me sometimes. And if you
Yeah,
remember, this behavior kind of plays to the card of all the organizations because data is a liquid gold. If
yeah,
you
for
want to
sure.
admit it or not, everybody now creates the content, creates everything. And there is this infamous case, I think it was in the 2012, 14, somewhere around there, where Cambridge Analytica has got caught around the things with selling the data from
Yeah,
Facebook. And that actually was, I think it was the last point where they actually, the governing officers and offices have actually said, you know what, we need to do something about that, because that actually plays against the basic human right, which is actually a democracy. So they manipulate the democratic approach to your selection, your opinions. It can be linked with the presidential election or any, for example, like Brexit votes or anything like that. So by like trying to understand from the data that they have about you, they can then put it back to you and kind of do reverse engineering of your thoughts and kind of remove the democratic approach, which is kind of very political. But that's one of the risks that can go on that. So when you think in the aftermath, is you literally influencing people to do what you want them to do, and it's not anymore up to the best things. Big,
no,
big, big risk.
you're absolutely right. And you made a valid point there about cookies acceptance. It wouldn't be the first time when I've tried to purchase something online, for a gift, a present, or even to go to a restaurant. And obviously, most companies are obligated to have a cookies policy, and you get that notification bar. And in some cases you can't move on and undertake that online service until you decide what you're going to do and how you're going to manage the cookies. It wouldn't be the first time I've been lazy and just accept all, especially if you connect through a personal email account as opposed to a business email account. But I do genuinely believe that most people don't understand the minefield they're getting into just by accepting those cookies. So you're absolutely right. We're going to have an absolute multitude of people listening to this podcast, both on our YouTube channel and obviously on the digital channels over the coming months. And there's going to be a variety of people throwing hundreds of questions at you at GISEC, I have no
Ready.
doubt. What's your one call to action? What is the one thing that you really want to get across, you want to impart to people when it comes to data? Only one thing. I'm going to hold you to one thing, Suzanne. What's your
Okay.
one call to action?
I would say ethical approach and understanding consequences. So when I would like to just elaborate on that a little bit is that many people do not understand that malicious actors actually want to cause you the harm, and they are not very ethical. So when somebody wants to do the harm, it can be anything from identity theft to actually embarrassment, leading extreme. I have heard about cases where people commit suicide because they have been a target of the spam or scams, and they lost money. They lost
Yeah.
something was important for them, or any private information, private pictures has erased, like kind of like embrace the internet world, which a lot of people don't take very, very lightly, and they commit suicide. So I think prevention of the hurt, and if you do collect the data as an organization, try to apply the ethical approach and be transparent. And for people, I know it's not something nice to kind of think in the paranoia way, but the fact that if you want to exchange your knowing what kind of potato you are for actually living in the fear for the rest of your life, I just think make a calculated decisions and make sure that you understand if that boost of your happy hormones are worth the long-term privacy data, which sadly now once it's entered digital world, it stays there. I can tell you from my background in the cybersecurity, it stays there. The footprint is there. It's not going away no matter what you're gonna try. So that would probably will be in the nutshell one thing which connects to each other. People know why are you sharing the data, and do you really have to? Do you have the need? And for businesses, be ethical as much as possible. We already have the element of the malicious actors trying to do the harm. Let's not put it to the business as well. So people are living the best life, the most protected life, and they know and they can influence what is happening with their data. That would be my point.
Listening to that summary, Susanne, I'm gonna nail it down even better for you because of some of the things you said. I'm gonna suggest that you say, "Don't be a lazy potato." There we go.
Love it.
Protect your data. It's your data. Protect it. You're absolutely right. It's fascinating what goes on in the digital world. It's great to know that people's data is being protected.
Mm-hmm.
In the UK, we've got the ICO, and obviously, you talked about Cambridge Analytica. They went in there like the police force, closed them down, and they absolutely pursued the wrongful doing there as far as they possibly could. So it's nice to see that we do have an organisation in the UK that's looking out for our best interests. I know that your subject is going to be really, really interesting, Susanne. We can't wait to hear it. I'll be there. My team will be there filming it and covering it. And believe me, there'll be lots of questions being asked. So bring your A game. It's been a pleasure.
Yes.
It's been a pleasure speaking to you, Susanne.
Thank you for having
What I
me.
would like to say is, if you like what you've heard, listeners, please remember to press that subscribe button. You'll get all of Susanne's contact details in the printed and digital edition of the GISEC Special Edition of Let's Talk Cyber. Susanne Bitter, just one thing for me to say. It's been a pleasure meeting you, and we do look forward to seeing you at GISEC in Dubai.
Thank you.
Thank you.